The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Confederation buzzed with an energy not seen in centuries. Representatives of over 300 spacefaring civilizations packed the massive chamber, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of evolution's endless possibilities. At the center of it all stood High Speaker Ixora, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into dancing patterns across the walls. "We gather today," she announced, her harmonics resonating through the neural translators, "to address what may be the greatest threat to galactic stability since the Void Wars." The chamber's ambient chatter died instantly. No one spoke of the Void Wars lightly. The holoprojector flared to life, displaying a blue-white marble suspended in space. Earth. To most of the assembly, it appeared unremarkable, one of countless life-bearing worlds scattered throughout the galaxy. But Ixora knew better. She had spent decades studying the reports, analyzing the data, and what she'd found terrified her. Observation Post 7249 has monitored this world for the past century, she continued. In that time, its dominant species has progressed from primitive combustion engines to rudimentary spaceflight. They split the atom, mapped their own genome, and created a planetary information network. The speed of their advancement is unprecedented. From his position in the upper tier, War Master Krevax chittered in approval. The Arthropoid commander had been pushing for intervention ever since the first reports of human nuclear weapons. "They are a weapon waiting to be forged," he called out, mandibles clicking. "Their bodies are built for endurance beyond any rational design. They can survive injuries that would kill most species. They crave combat, seek out challenges, and grow stronger from adversity. That is precisely why we must leave them be." The objection came from Ambassador Cynthia, her bioluminescent patterns flashing with agitation. Any species with such potential should be approached diplomatically, not subjugated. The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. Ixora let it continue for exactly 30 seconds before activating the harmonic dampeners. In the sudden silence, she spoke again. "We have 3 options before us. First, we can continue observation only, allowing them to develop independently. Second, we can initiate diplomatic contact, as Ambassador Cynthia suggests. Or third," she paused, her crystalline surface dimming slightly, "we can vote for intervention and control." War Master Krevax rose again. "I have studied their conflicts. In the past century alone, they have fought 2 planetary wars and countless smaller ones. Their first response to any new technology is to weaponize it. Their entertainment glorifies combat. Their children play at warfare. Left unchecked, they will become a terror upon the galaxy. They also create art that moves even non-human hearts." Cynthia countered. "They compose music that speaks to universal emotions. They write stories imagining peaceful contact with alien life. Their capacity for creation matches their capacity for destruction. And that makes them even more dangerous." A new voice cut in. First Speaker Zaltan of the Commerce Guild rose on his antigrav platform, his cybernetically enhanced brain processing multiple data streams simultaneously, their creativity combined with their aggressive drive. Their ability to imagine new possibilities and then forcefully pursue them. The economic simulations are clear. Within 3 centuries, they would dominate galactic trade through sheer innovation. Ixora watched the momentum building. She had seen it before. Fear masquerading as wisdom, prejudice wearing the mask of prudence. But she was bound by her position to remain neutral, to let the assembly decide. "I propose," Krevax announced, "immediate intervention. We have the technology to suppress their more aggressive tendencies while preserving their physical capabilities. Under proper guidance, they could become an invaluable resource. Their endurance and adaptability would make them ideal for tasks too dangerous or difficult for other species." "You mean slaves?" Cynthia's patterns flashed deep red. "Let's not hide behind euphemisms. I mean survival." Krevax's mandibles clattered. "Theirs and ours. Better they serve the greater good than emerge as a threat to galactic peace." The voting commenced. Ixora watched the numbers flow in. each delegation making their choice. She had known what the outcome would be. Fear was always a stronger motivator than hope. But as the final tally displayed above the chamber, she felt a deep resonance of uncertainty in her crystalline core. "The assembly has spoken," Ixer announced, her harmonics flat and controlled. "Intervention is approved. The military council will oversee the operation, with support from the Commerce Guild for resource allocation." As the chamber began to empty, Ambassador Cynthia approached Ixera's podium. Her bioluminescence had dimmed to almost nothing, a sign of deep distress in her species. "They don't understand what they're doing," Cynthia said quietly. "Humans don't break under pressure. They adapt. They overcome. Every challenge makes them stronger." "Perhaps," Ixera replied, her crystal surface rippling with complex patterns. "But that is no longer our decision to make." Above them, the image of Earth continued its slow rotation, its people still unaware that their destiny had just been decided by beings they had only imagined in their stories. The invasion would begin within a standard year. What no one in the chamber realized was that in voting to prevent humanity from becoming a threat, they had just created exactly what they feared most: a humanity with a genuine reason to fight back. Resistance. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the ruins of what had once been Singapore's Central Command, her combat exoskeleton sensors painting a grim picture of the devastation around her. The alien invasion force, the Confederation as they called themselves, had expected Earth's military centers to fall within hours. Singapore had held out for 3 weeks. "Status report," she subvocalized, her neural implant transmitting to the surviving members of her squad. The responses came back instantly, projected onto her augmented reality display. Ammunition critical, power cells at 30%, but structural integrity still holding. They'd learned early on that alien energy weapons, while devastating against traditional armor, struggled to penetrate the metamaterial coating they'd reverse-engineered from a downed fighter. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm. "Cross-spectrum analysis confirms it. They're not using their full weapon capabilities. They're trying to take the city intact." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. That had been humanity's first real advantage. The aliens wanted Earth's infrastructure and population relatively undamaged. They weren't fighting a war of extinction, but a war of conquest. It gave the defenders options. "Incoming transmission," her AI assistant announced. "It's Professor Zhang." The professor's hologram materialized in Sarah's HUD, his usually immaculate lab coat showing signs of hasty repair. "Captain, we've cracked it. The alien neural networks, they're not just translation devices, they're control systems." Sarah's pulse quickened. They'd suspected as much after capturing several alien soldiers alive. The neural translators every Confederation soldier wore weren't just for communication. They were leashes, ensuring compliance with the rigid hierarchy of their military. "Can we hijack them?" "Better." Zhang's eyes gleamed with the peculiar joy of a scientist who'd solved an impossible puzzle. "We can shut them down completely. Their entire command and control structure relies on these devices. Without them, their coordination falls apart." High above, Sarah's sensors tracked another wave of alien dropships descending through the atmosphere. The Confederation's strategy was methodical, overwhelming, and utterly predictable. They fought by the book, following tactical doctrines perfected over millennia of warfare against enemies who played by the same rules. Humanity had never been good at following rules. "Time to implementation," Sarah asked, already formulating plans. "The virus is ready now. We just need to get it into their primary command node. After that, it'll propagate through their entire network within minutes." Sarah switched channels. "All units, this is Phoenix Actual. Operation Babel is a go. I repeat, Babel is go." Across the ruined city, hidden resistance cells sprang into action. They'd spent weeks appearing weak, appearing beaten, all while studying their enemies' patterns. Now, as another peacekeeping force descended to secure their surrender, the trap was ready. The first alien dropship never saw the modified surface-to-air missile coming. Its metamaterial coating, copied from their own technology, made it invisible to their sensors until impact. The explosion sent the massive craft spinning into two of its companions, creating a cascade of destruction in the sky. But that was just the distraction. While the Confederation commanders were focused on the aerial attack, small teams of humans in reverse-engineered stealth suits were already infiltrating their command ship. They moved like ghosts through the supposedly secure vessel, their mere presence a violation of everything the aliens thought they knew about human capabilities. Command node located, Rodriguez reported. Uploading virus now. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like dominoes falling in slow motion, the alien coordination began to break down. Ships lost contact with their commanders. Ground forces found themselves unable to communicate. The elegant hierarchy of the Confederation military dissolved into chaos. Sarah watched through her enhanced optics as alien soldiers tore off their neural translators, suddenly free from the control that had been disguised as mere communication technology. Some fled. Others seemed lost, looking around in confusion as if seeing their surroundings for the first time. All units, advance, Sarah ordered. Capture, don't kill. Every prisoner is a source of intelligence and technology. As her forces moved through the city, securing alien equipment and taking prisoners, Sarah received reports from around the globe. The pattern was the same everywhere. The seemingly invincible Confederation forces were falling into disarray, their technological superiority rendered meaningless by their dependence on centralized control. In the command center of the alien flagship, now under human control, Sarah found a terminal still displaying tactical data. The Confederation had expected to subdue Earth in weeks, months at most. Instead, humanity had turned their own technology against them, adapting and improving upon captured equipment with a speed that seemed impossible to their would-be conquerors. Professor Zhang, she called over the comm. How long until you can get their shipboard AI talking to us? Already done, he replied cheerfully. You wouldn't believe how inefficient their programming is. All that technology. And they never considered that someone might think outside their established parameters. Sarah looked out over the city she'd helped defend. The aliens had come to enslave a species they considered dangerous but manageable. Instead, they'd given humanity access to advanced technology and a crash course in interstellar warfare. More importantly, they'd given Earth's fractious nations a common enemy, forcing cooperation and innovation on an unprecedented scale. Send a message to all Confederation forces in the system, she ordered. Tell them we're willing to accept their surrender. And tell them to inform their leaders that humanity is ready to negotiate. As equals. The response would come soon enough. But whatever happened next, the galaxy would have to face an uncomfortable truth. In trying to prevent humanity from becoming a threat, they had only succeeded in proving that humans were far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Evolution. Chief Researcher Xerix of the Confederation Science Council had never felt more uncomfortable in his crystalline form. Sitting across from him in the newly established Earth Diplomatic Center in Geneva was Dr. Emily Martinez, the human scientist who had not only cracked their neural network encryption, but improved it by an order of magnitude. Your security architecture was elegant, she was saying, manipulating a holographic model between them. But it was built on assumptions. You assumed no species would advance quickly enough to reverse engineer it during combat. You assumed pattern recognition would follow your established parameters. Xerix's surface rippled with complicated emotions. In the 6 months since the failed invasion, he'd been part of the team studying how humans had so thoroughly defeated their supposedly superior forces. Each discovery left him more astounded and more concerned. You modified our technology, he noted, trying to keep his harmonics neutral. The improvements you made to the stealth systems alone should have taken decades of research. Emily smiled. We had motivation. Plus, we've been imagining ways to do these things for centuries through our fiction. Once we saw real examples, we just had to match theory to practice. That was another thing that disturbed Xerix, the human concept of science fiction. His species, like most in the Confederation, developed technology through careful incremental steps. Humans dreamed up impossible things first, then figured out how to make them real. "The Council has concerns," he said carefully. "The rate at which you're advancing is exactly what you feared," Emily finished. "That's why you tried to enslave us, isn't it? Better to control us than risk us becoming equals." Before Xerix could respond, his sensors detected a new presence entering the room. Admiral Sarah Chen, the architect of humanity's victory, strode in with the casual confidence that seemed to characterize her species. She wore no weapons, but her bearing made it clear she needed none. "The Krevax Dominion is making noise again," she announced, settling into a chair. "They're claiming we violated Confederation law by modifying their technology without permission." Emily laughed. "They invaded us. What did they expect? They expected us to behave like every other species they've encountered," Sarah replied. "Instead, we took their neural networks and turned them into true universal translators. We took their stealth tech and made it work in ways they never imagined. We looked at their FTL drives and immediately asked, what if we tried it this way instead?" Xerix's crystalline form vibrated with distress. This was exactly what the conservative factions had warned about. Humanity wasn't just using Confederation technology. They were revolutionizing it, pushing boundaries that had been accepted as fixed for millennia. "The Commerce Guild is particularly concerned about your improvements to their trade algorithms," he ventured. "You mean the ones that were artificially limiting economic growth to maintain political stability?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "We optimized them. Remove the artificial constraints. The resulting economic boom has already lifted 3 systems out of poverty." "That's not the point." Xerix's harmonics rose with agitation. "There are reasons for those constraints. The galaxy operates on careful balance." "The galaxy operates on fear," Sarah interrupted. "Fear of change, fear of progress, fear of anything that challenges the established order. That's why you tried to enslave us, isn't it? Not because we were dangerous, but because we represent change." Xerix felt his crystal matrix resonate with an uncomfortable truth. The human's words cut through centuries of rationalization. The Confederation's great peace had been built on stagnation, enforced by technology that could have done so much more. "Your species," he began slowly, "you don't just adapt to challenges. You actively seek them out. You look at limitations and see opportunities. It's unsettling." "It's who we are," Emily said simply. "We can't help wanting to understand things, to improve them. And now that we have access to advanced technology," she gestured at the hologram, which had evolved into a complex representation of a new form of FTL travel, one that made the Confederation's methods look primitive by comparison. "The Assembly meets next week to discuss humanity's status," Xerix said. "Many are calling for sanctions, restrictions on your access to Confederation technology." Sarah smiled, and Xerix felt his crystal matrix vibrate with apprehension. It was the smile of someone who knew they held the winning hand. "They can try," she said, "but they've already seen what happens when they try to restrict us. Besides, half their member worlds are already adopting our improvements. Are they going to sanction them too?" She was right, Xerix realized. The changes humanity had introduced were spreading too fast to contain. Their innovations in medicine alone had several Confederation species clamoring for closer ties with Earth. Their improvements to FTL travel had opened up previously unreachable regions of space. "We're not your enemies," Emily added more gently. "We never were. All we want is the freedom to explore, to create, to push boundaries." "Is that really so frightening?" "Yes," Xerix thought but didn't say. To species that had built their civilization on careful control and measured progress, humanity's restless creativity was terrifying. But as he watched Emily manipulate the hologram, casually solving problems his people had struggled with for generations, he understood something else. It was also exhilarating. Revolution, First speaker Zoltan of the Commerce Guild stood before his private viewport, his cybernetic enhancements struggling to process the radical changes sweeping through the galaxy. Just 5 years after the failed invasion of Earth, the careful order he had helped maintain for centuries was unraveling. Another trade federation has adopted human economic protocols. His aide reported, neural feeds flickering with data. The Proxima Alliance is reporting a 300% increase in innovation rates since implementing their educational methods. Zoltan's artificial eyes focused on the bustling spaceship traffic outside. Even here, at the heart of Confederation space, human influence was visible. Ships of radical new designs darted between the traditional vessels, their hybrid technology representing the unprecedented fusion of multiple species' engineering philosophies. "Show me the latest statistics," he commanded. A holographic display materialized, telling a story that would have been unthinkable half a decade ago. Worlds that adopted human-inspired policies were experiencing explosive growth in technology, culture, and quality of life. Species that had been locked in rigid social hierarchies for millennia were discovering new potentials. The carefully managed trade routes that had kept the galaxy stable were being replaced by dynamic, evolving networks. "Sir," his aide ventured carefully, "the Krevaks are threatening military action. They claim human influence is destabilizing their control over their client worlds." "Of course they are," Zoltan replied dryly. "Their entire society is built on rigid order. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology, it was their ideas." He remembered the warnings Ambassador Cynthia had given during that fateful assembly vote. She had predicted that trying to suppress humanity would only make them stronger. None of them had understood just how right she would be. The door chimed, admitting his expected guest. Commander Maya Singh of the Earth Diplomatic Corps entered with the casual grace that seemed to characterize humans in any situation. Her dark eyes took in the room's advanced technology with professional interest rather than awe. "First speaker," she greeted him. "I assume this is about the Krevak situation." Among other things, Zoltan gestured to a seat. "Their threatened military action is an empty threat," Maya interrupted smoothly. "Their own warrior caste is too busy experimenting with human combat techniques to support a war. It turns out that when you give soldiers permission to think creatively, they tend to question rigid hierarchies." Zoltan's cybernetic systems registered the truth in her words. The Krevak's military, once the most disciplined force in the galaxy, was transforming. Their warriors were adopting human concepts like tactical flexibility and individual initiative. Their commanders were learning to adapt rather than simply following ancient doctrines. "You're changing everything," he said quietly. "Not through force, but through inspiration." Maya smiled. "We're not changing anything. We're just showing people what's possible when you remove artificial limitations. Every species has the potential for creativity, for innovation. We're just reminding them of that." An alert flashed across Zoltan's neural feed. Another major trading house had just announced adoption of human economic models. The old system, built on careful control and planned scarcity, was giving way to something more dynamic, more unpredictable, and more profitable. "The assembly is in chaos," he noted. "Half the member species are demanding we officially recognize Earth as a major power. The other half want to quarantine your world before you spread more dangerous ideas." "And what do you want?" First speaker. Maya's question cut straight to the heart of the matter, in that direct way humans had. Zoltan turned back to the viewport, watching the dance of ships against the stars. His cybernetic systems calculated probabilities, processed trends, analyzed outcomes. The conclusion was inescapable. "I want to survive," he said finally, "not just personally, but as a civilization. For millennia, we've equated stability with stagnation. We built systems to control and limit, believing that was the only way to maintain peace. But now you're seeing another way," Maya finished. "A way where progress doesn't have to mean chaos, where different species can learn from each other instead of fearing each other." A new alert flashed. the Proxima Alliance was reporting breakthrough developments in FTL technology, achieved through collaboration between human and alien scientists. The old barriers between species were breaking down, replaced by networks of cooperation and shared discovery. The conservative factions claim you're destroying our way of life, Zoltan said. We're evolving it, Maya corrected. Change was inevitable. The only question was whether it would come through conflict or cooperation. Your invasion of Earth forced our hand, but it also showed us what was possible when different species worked together. Zoltan Cybernetics processed her words, finding truth in them. The failed invasion had given humanity access to advanced technology, yes, but more importantly, it had exposed them to new ways of thinking. And in return, they were showing the galaxy that progress didn't have to be feared. Ascendance. High Speaker Ixura stood once again before the Grand Assembly, exactly 10 years after the vote that had changed everything. The chamber was different now, redesigned with human-inspired architecture that emphasized openness and interaction rather than hierarchy and separation. Representatives from Earth sat among the other species, their presence a reminder of how much had changed. A decade ago, she began, her crystalline form capturing and refracting the chamber's light in complex patterns. We gathered here in fear. We saw humanity as a threat to be contained. We voted to enslave them, believing we could harness their strengths while suppressing their spirit. She paused, letting the weight of that historical mistake settle over the assembly. We could not have been more wrong. The holoprojector activated, but instead of showing Earth as it had 10 years ago, it displayed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Spreading out from Earth like ripples in a pond were waves of innovation and change that had transformed thousands of worlds. The Krevax Dominion, once the most rigid military power in known space, now hosts the galaxy's leading center for tactical innovation. Ixura continued. The Commerce Guild's adoption of human economic principles has triggered an unprecedented era of prosperity. The Science Council reports more breakthroughs in the past decade than in the previous century. Admiral Sarah Chen, now Earth's senior representative to the Assembly, watched from her position with quiet satisfaction. Beside her sat Dr. Emily Martinez, whose work on integrating different species technologies had earned her the galaxy's highest scientific honors. They had been among the first to understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their physical capabilities or even their technology. It was their ability to imagine better possibilities and inspire others to reach for them. But perhaps most significantly, Ixura's harmonics took on a tone of wonder. We're seeing changes that go beyond mere technology or economics. Species that had been locked in unchanging patterns for millennia are rediscovering their capacity for growth and adaptation. The barriers between cultures are breaking down, replaced by networks of cooperation and shared discovery. War Master Krevax, now a leading advocate for military reform, chittered in agreement. His own transformation from fierce opponent of humanity to one of their strongest allies symbolized the broader changes sweeping the galaxy. They showed us that strength comes not from rigid control, but from embracing change and adaptation, he announced. My warriors are stronger now than ever, not because we forced them to be, but because we've given them the freedom to grow. The assembly murmured in agreement. Even the most conservative factions could no longer deny the benefits that human influence had brought. Worlds that had adopted Earth's principles of open inquiry and individual initiative were flourishing. Species that had been stagnant for generations were experiencing cultural and technological renaissances. 10 years ago, Ixura continued, we feared humanity would become a dominant power that would threaten our way of life. Instead, they have become something far more significant. They have become teachers, showing us how to unlock the potential that lay dormant in our own species. The holographic display shifted, showing scenes from across the galaxy. Hybrid ships incorporating multiple species technologies, mixed crews working together with easy familiarity, new forms of art and music that blended different cultural traditions. The rigid boundaries that had defined galactic society for millennia were dissolving, replaced by something more dynamic and alive. Therefore, Ixora's crystal surface blazed with complex patterns. I propose that we formally recognize what has already become reality. Earth will not just join the Confederation. They will help us transform it into something new. The Galactic Alliance, a true partnership of species dedicated not just to stability, but to growth and discovery. The vote, when it came, was as decisive as the one 10 years ago, but in the opposite direction. The same assembly that had once voted to enslave humanity now voted unanimously to embrace their leadership. After the session, Ambassador Cynthia approached Sarah and Emily, her bioluminescent patterns glowing with satisfaction. "You proved me right," she said, "though I never imagined just how right I would be." "We didn't do it alone," Sarah replied, gesturing at the diverse group of species mingling in the chamber. "We just showed people what was possible when you stop fearing change and start embracing it." "And now?" Cynthia asked. "What next?" Emily smiled, the same expression of endless curiosity that had helped humanity reach for the stars in the first place. "Now we do what humans have always done. We keep exploring, keep creating, keep pushing boundaries. But this time, we do it together with all our new allies." Above them, the holographic galaxy continued its stately rotation, its spiral arms now alive with the combined light of thousands of civilizations learning to grow and change together. The species that had once voted to enslave humanity had instead been transformed by them, not through force or dominance, but through the most human qualities of all: the ability to imagine better possibilities and the determination to make them real. The end was really just the beginning. Humanity had not just survived their trial by fire. They had turned it into an opportunity to forge something greater than anyone had imagined possible. And somewhere out there, in the vast unexplored reaches of space, new challenges and possibilities waited to be discovered by a galaxy that had finally learned to embrace its full potential.